You can feel it in the streets of Dakar. You hear it in the drums of Accra. You see it scribbled in chalk on the walls of Kinshasa and whispered through the alleys of Lagos. Ibrahim Traoré should be president of Africa. It used to be just a thought, a bold, maybe even reckless wish shared among students sipping hot tea in dim hostels. But now it's more than that. It's becoming a chorus, a call, a cry from a continent that's tired of being tricked by empty suits and smiling puppets. And I'll tell you why. This man, this young captain from Burkina Faso, didn't come into power with fireworks or champagne. He came in during a storm, the kind of storm that topples governments and exposes cowards. And instead of bending, he stood up straighter. Where others folded, he fought. The man took a broken country and started fixing it without asking for applause. You know how rare that is? He didn't wait for France to give permission. He didn't kneel to the IMF or wear the fake smiles that get you invited to development summits, where Africa is always the topic but never the speaker. He walked into power like a man with nothing to lose, but everything to protect. First thing he did, he told the French troops to pack their bags, and they did. Do you know how many leaders have tried that and ended up exiled, poisoned, or 6 feet under? But Traoré did it with calm conviction. Not with rage, not with threats, but with dignity, because he knew something that terrified foreign powers. Africa is enough. Next, he turned to Burkina Faso's wealth. Gold. 70 tons of it, bleeding out of the country every year. And while the people in Bobo Dioulasso fetched water from rivers and children studied under trees, that gold sparkled in Swiss banks. But Traoré, he flipped the script. He canceled crooked mining contracts. He made sure that Burkina Faso's gold started staying in Burkina Faso. And when they tried to twist his arm through sanctions and media slander, he didn't flinch. Because the truth was louder than their headlines. He didn't stop at sovereignty. He built solidarity. Real, hard, strategic alliances with Mali and Niger, nations just as fed up with being treated like resource farms for Europe. Together, they formed the Alliance of Sahel States, a bloc, a shield, a signal to the world that the era of divide and rule in West Africa is over. They even started talks to create a shared currency, not backed by the French franc, but backed by dignity, by gold, by the strength of their own hands. That's why I say, if he can do this for one country, what could he do for a continent? People in Nairobi are saying it. Taxi drivers in Johannesburg are saying it. Even grandmothers in the suburbs of Abidjan, with radios turned low and eyes on the future, are saying it. Ibrahim Traoré should be president of Africa. Not because he's perfect, not because we want another strong man, but because finally we have a leader who listens when the people cry and acts when others hide behind process. He didn't wait for some foreign consultant to write a 300-page report before feeding the poor. He created direct programs, feeding families, arming local defense units, building schools, while others were still having lunch in Brussels. The youth of Africa, we see him. I was in a cafe in Addis Ababa when I saw a group of students, Ethiopians, Sudanese, Eritreans, even a Somali girl, watching one of his speeches. They didn't speak much French, but it didn't matter. You don't need subtitles to understand courage. And across the ocean, in the Caribbean, in Brazil, in the Bronx, our brothers and sisters in the diaspora are lifting his name like a banner, not because he asked for it, but because he earned it. They see in him the possibility of what Africa could be if it had one heartbeat instead of 54 broken ones. And maybe that's why the West is scrambling, why they're suddenly interested in restoring democracy in places they never cared about. Because Traoré is doing what no one else dared. He's making Pan-Africanism real, not in poetry, not in theory, but in policy, in defense pacts, in shared wealth. You see, for decades, they taught us that African unity was a fantasy. They told us we were too different, too divided, that we needed their aid, their advice, their NGOs. But Traoré didn't buy it. He walked into that palace in Ouagadougou with calloused hands and fire in his eyes. And he told his people, you are not poor. You've been robbed. And just like that, the spell began to break. Now, across the continent, youth are not just talking about change, they're organizing. They're writing songs, painting murals, marching in the streets with his face on their shirts. Not like fans, but like believers in a new future. And here's the part that gives me chills. He never asked for power. He took responsibility. He didn't run for office with slogans. He stood up when the moment came, and Africa noticed. Because deep down, we were all waiting for someone who wouldn't blink. Someone who wouldn't sell us for a seat at some G7 table. Someone who wouldn't beg to be seen, but would stand so tall he couldn't be ignored. And now that we found him, we're not letting go. Ibrahim Traoré should be president of Africa. That's what they're saying in Bamako. That's what they're shouting in Lagos. That's what they're posting in Accra. And me, I say it every day, because it's not just about a man, it's about a movement. And this man, this soldier, this servant, this son of the soil, has become the mirror we hold up to every other leader on the continent. He's showing us what real leadership looks like, not with suits and sound bites, but with sacrifice. And if he could unite 3 countries in less than a year, what could he do with 54? What could he do if we stopped drawing lines and started drawing purpose? If we stopped calling each other foreigners and started calling each other family? If we stopped letting the West pick our presidents and we chose our own? They fear that idea because they know that when Africa unites, their game is over. Their profits vanish. Their influence shrinks. But we're not afraid. Not anymore. Because for the first time in a long time, Africa sees clearly. Africa believes again. And that belief is marching through the Sahel. It's singing in Swahili. It's rising with every sunrise over Mount Kilimanjaro. It's dancing barefoot in the alleys of Kigali. That belief, that hope, is wearing a name on its chest, Ibrahim Traoré. And that voice, that chant, that prophecy wrapped in dust and blood and fire, is just getting started. And it is just getting started. You see, in the old days, when a lion roared in one corner of Africa, the rest of the continent stayed silent. Too far, too fragmented to hear it. But today when Traoré speaks, everyone listens. From the slums of Harare to the hills of Kabylie, from the tech hubs of Nairobi to the fishing villages of Lamu. The echo doesn't fade, it multiplies. In Libya, I saw graffiti that read, "One Africa, one leader." In Sierra Leone, a fisherman wore a shirt with his face printed boldly across the chest, under the words, "Our last defense." Even in the cold suburbs of Paris, where African immigrants are often silenced, young men spray paint walls with one phrase, "Bring him here, let him lead us." They know, we all know. It's not about replacing our presidents. It's about replacing the system that makes them weak. A system that tells them, if you disobey, we'll crush you. If you resist, we'll isolate you. If you fight, we'll erase you. But they haven't been able to erase him. No matter how hard they try, with economic pressure, disinformation campaigns, assassination rumors, or sabotage, Traoré keeps standing. Why? Because he doesn't stand alone. He stands with the miners who now get a fair wage. He stands with the mothers whose children can finally go to school, not to dig gold. He stands with the soldiers, the teachers, the farmers, the youth, the very spine of Africa. And that spine is straightening. Traoré once said, "They think we are poor, but we are not poor. We are the richest people ruled by the most expensive thieves." And just like that, a generation that had given up on politics woke up. Students who never voted started organizing. Artists turned their music into resistance. Even old chiefs, once silenced by bribes, began blessing his name. They see in him what we've been begging for. Not a savior, but a standard. A leader who doesn't just speak the language of freedom, but lives it. And isn't that what we've been yearning for? Not another speech in Geneva, not another handshake at the UN, but someone who refuses to sell the continent's soul for a medal? This is why I say he doesn't need to campaign. Traoré doesn't need to tour every capital. He doesn't need posters on every streetlight or jingles on every radio. His campaign is already etched into the conscience of the continent. Every injustice he exposes, every corrupt deal he cancels, every child he puts back in school, Every weapon he redirects from foreign bases to local hands. That's his campaign. And it's working. When coups break out now, people don't fear chaos. They ask, is he behind it? Is this the beginning of the African Spring? Think about that. A leader once dismissed as a rebel, now becoming the symbol of renewal. There's a reason the West won't say his name on television. There's a reason they whisper about him in closed-door briefings. Because he's not just a man, he's a mirror, reflecting everything their system tried to suppress in Africa. Strength, clarity, integrity, resistance, unity. And here's what makes it even more powerful. He's young. At 36, he's younger than most presidents' sons. He's part of the generation that understands TikTok and revolution in the same breath. He doesn't just walk with the youth. He is the youth. He doesn't attend colonial ceremonies. He doesn't beg for loans. He doesn't dance for investment. He builds, he defends, he teaches. And when necessary, he fights. That is why Africans across the continent and beyond now whisper a dangerous, thrilling idea. What if this man didn't just lead Burkina Faso? What if he led us all? Because Africa is not weak. Africa is waiting for a reason to rise, not in fragments, but as one. And Ibrahim Traoré may be that reason, a continent stitched together not by old colonial borders, but by shared destiny, not by treaties signed in foreign languages, but by the fire in our bones. He has already shown us what one nation can do with courage. Now we ask, what could 54 nations do with one vision? The drums are already beating, and I believe the day will come when in Addis, in Algiers, in Yaoundé, in Lusaka, in Kampala, we won't ask if he can lead us. We'll ask, how long until he does? Because we've had enough hand-picked leaders. We want a leader picked by history, a leader for Africa, not for a tribe, not for a region, not for a flag. And his name is already rising, unstoppable, on the lips of the people. Ibrahim Traoré, the man who reminded Africa that it can stand. And now maybe, just maybe, the man who will help it walk as one. And now maybe, just maybe, the man who will help it walk as one. Imagine what that would mean. No more ECOWAS sanctions acting like chains. No more puppet leaders sent to bark for their masters in Paris or Washington. No more waiting for approval before feeding our people, before defending our soil, before building our future. Imagine a continent where the borders between Nigeria and Cameroon, between Kenya and Uganda, no longer divide, but connect. Imagine a continent that negotiates with China and the West on its own terms. Not as beggars, but as partners. Or better yet, as equals. And who better to guide that rebirth than the man who already did the impossible? He didn't lead with fear. He led with discipline. He led with sacrifice. He led by example. Because in an age where leaders talk more than they act, Traoré's silence became his loudest message. He didn't respond to foreign insults with press statements. He responded by reclaiming his country's gold. He didn't react to sanctions with tears. He reacted by feeding his people with his own harvest. He didn't demand to be respected. He simply earned it, with every step, every policy, every risk. And so the people began to dream again. Not about escaping to Europe, but about staying and rebuilding. Not about protesting poverty, but about creating power. And this time, not power borrowed from outsiders, but power that rises from the ground beneath our feet, from the iron in our blood and the ancestors in our bones. Now the question is no longer, can Africa unite? The question is, will we follow the one man brave enough to start the march? Because Ibrahim Traoré is not just a soldier with a uniform. He is the echo of Sankara's courage. He is the answer to Lumumba's last prayer. He is the redemption of every African child who has been told to shrink. And maybe, just maybe, he is the first president of a united Africa. So I ask you now, wherever you are, whether you're in Lagos or London, Cairo or Cape Town, Nairobi or New York, when the time comes, when history calls your name and asks, what did you do when Africa began to rise? What will your answer be? Will you whisper from the shadows, or will you rise with the roar? Because the lion has already awakened. and the drum beats are getting louder. The only question left is, are you ready to follow them home?